Residents in parts of Sydney's southwest have been ordered to evacuate, ahead of another night of heavy rain expected to hit the east coast of NSW this evening. Key points: heavy rain is expected to hit the Hunter region overnight. Heavy rain is expected to hit the Hunter region overnight. Communities are sandbagging and preparing their homes, with rain between 50 mm to 150 mm forecast. Communities are sandbagging and preparing their homes, with rain between 50 mm to 150 mm forecast. Motorists have been warned of potentially damaging conditions on the road. Authorities fear flooding will be worse than last week in some areas due to a predicted deluge of rain set to hit much of NSW's coastline. On Monday afternoon, the State Emergency Service issued an evacuation order for 3 streets and a caravan park in Camden, giving locals until 9 p.m. to move. The affected areas include Sheathers Lane, Kirkham Lane, the Poplar Caravan Park and parts of Menangle Road. Says Commissioner Carleen York said although the order was for 9 p.m. tonight, recent severe weather events had been moving much quicker than predicted. Don't leave it until the last minute. Get your goods together and get out safe, she said. The SES has now told residents and businesses along Peter Avenue between Onslow Avenue and Belgiany Avenue to leave by midnight, or risk becoming isolated by rising floodwaters at the Camden Weir. Those on Camden's Corder Road between Barsden Street and Murray Street also need to be out by midnight. The SES said residents who stay could become trapped without power, water and other essential services, and it might become too dangerous to rescue them. Floods at Hawkesbury overlooking the Richmond lowlands, where farms, turf and vegetables lie beneath the surface. Flood evacuation warnings have also been issued for northern parts of Mulgoa and Emu Plains, near Penrith in Western Sydney. Earlier today, Ms. York said residents in the Hunter region down to the Illawarra, particularly those near the Hawkesbury River, should prepare their homes. There are heavy rains today. We are working very busily in those communities, but particularly around Kiama, Sussex Inlet, the Shoalhaven and Illawarra, she said. Bureau of Meteorologists spokesman Dean Narramore rainfalls between 50 mm and 150 mm, and wind gusts of up to 90 km per hour were expected over the next 24 hours. We're looking at flooding similar to last week on some parts of the river, and in other areas it could be worse than what we saw last weekend, Mr. Narramore said. He also warned of potentially dangerous driving conditions from this evening for motorists in the Sydney metropolitan and across rain-affected areas. An evacuation order is in place for parts of the Hawkesbury region near Londonderry, and severe weather warnings for heavy rainfall and damaging winds extend from Coffs Harbour all the way down to Bega. NSW Premier Dominic Perrottet says 2,000 homes have been deemed uninhabitable by the record floods that have devastated the state. The Premier this morning said the sole focus over coming days was to get people back on their feet. Mr. Perrottet has asked for 5,000 Australian Defence Force troops to help with the major clean-up operation, some of which arrived yesterday, and others set to arrive over coming days. There's a presence that's building, and it's going to be very important, because this clean-up operation here is going to be substantive, Mr. Perrottet said from Lismore. From Lismore to Ballina to smaller towns like Karaki and Woodburn, which we have just been able to get access to yesterday. This is going to be a major operation to get our communities back on their feet, and we're going to put everything into it. Sydney can expect more wet weather this week. So far 2,000 homes out of 3,500 inspected have been deemed uninhabitable, Mr. Perrottet said. My sole focus right now is to get this cleanup to occur, to get people back on their feet, to get people into homes, to get money into the pockets of families and businesses, and provide as much support as we can, he said. A Gunnellabar evacuation centre social worker said volunteers were struggling to respond to the highly complex needs of flood-affected locals at the relief facility. There are people here experiencing high levels of family violence who've gone back to their perpetrator, because that's dry land, people needing methadone, people needing prescriptions. AJ told ABC Radio Melbourne from Lismore. There's been no official government presence beyond a couple of the Department of Communities and Justice workers, and we've been doing a lot of the immediate crisis support as volunteers. The cleanup of Lismore continues after last week's record floods. AJ said volunteers were also struggling with a lack of internet services. We tried to set up an Excel spreadsheet on Wednesday for the many social workers and therapists who are coming through wanting to help. We've just set up a whiteboard and a roster, AJ said. I'm just checking people's qualifications, and we have a daybook that we're writing things down on in case we get subpoenaed. Lismore residents say the life-threatening event will remain with the entire community for some time. Mr. Perrottet said difficult access to flood-isolated areas was the reason some communities were waiting days to be rescued and supplied with food and fuel. He earlier told Channel 9 he was sorry families were still in desperate need of support. I'm very sorry, it could have been done better. We're doing absolutely everything we can to get those power and supplies in. It's all hands on deck to get the cleanup done and supplies in, Mr. Perrottet said. He later told ABC News the government would reflect, review and be completely honest about what they could have done better. Many of our communities up here were isolated, we couldn't get into them during the torrential conditions. We weren't able to fly into some of those communities, and you've got to plan for the worst, he said. The stories that we've heard, the sense of abandonment that many people had in devastating circumstances is heartbreaking, and we need to ensure it doesn't happen again.